Welcome to BP The Bible Perspective. President Donald Trump, is he a fulfillment of biblical prophecy? Now, before we get into it, please like and share these videos and subscribe to BP The Bible Perspective. That's BP The Bible Perspective. And if you have a comment or a question, feel free to share it in the comment section. Now, our President Donald Trump, since him gliding down the escalators back in, I think it was 2015, when he announced his presidential campaign, has been a polarizing figure. And what has been more puzzling, especially to me, is how Christians so unswervingly support him. He enjoys 85% of the evangelical vote. Now, that's not to be confused with all Christians, but certainly the evangelical people who would consider themselves evangelical support him faithfully. In fact, to the point that they turn a blind eye to his many moral failings. Some even suggest that he is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. They certainly assert that God placed him in office, and thus, therefore, we should heed God's fulfilled will. Now, all of these things, of course, is if you want to act as if this nation started 3 years ago, or that this nation has been in darkness in the previous administrations, which people do say. Now, we're not going to get into that now, but the idea is that now what the evangelicals are saying is that in this darkness of time, there arose a light in the form of Donald Trump. Now, look at this article taken from LifeSite, written by Michelle Fitzpatrick Thomas, January 30th, 2020. Now, the site is LifeSite. I think it's an online conservative news site, but conservative. And listen to this title. Trump's fight against evil is similar to this Old Testament king. Now, look at that. Now, the reason why I'm looking at this article right here, I'm choosing this article because this article reflects the opinions pretty much across the board of how evangelicals feel. And let me see if I can find one more, because I think there's another one that I want to kind of pick from, just to kind of show you some continuity. Okay. Here's one that I posted on my Facebook page, Lindbergh Cornell. And this is in the Christian Post. And let me snap on here, because this one says, how can you follow Jesus and support Donald Trump? And this is written by Shane Eidelman. Okay. And it's actually dated today, February 4th, 2020. Now, I'm not going to get into his argument so much because these two arguments are the same. My question goes back to, is Donald Trump, okay, a fulfillment of Bible prophecy? Is he God's man? Now, this article is sort of raising the question that could it be that Donald Trump, like King Cyrus. So let's I want to kind of go, let's see, I'm just going to read some excerpts here. Look at, he says, now this is just an excerpt. Now remember the title, and the title itself says that Trump's fight against evil. Now get that. Is similar to this Old Testament king. Before I read that, let me let's see. I'm going to read the beginning. He says, much has been spoken and written lately regarding the evangelical community's feelings towards President Trump, especially since the Christianity Today editorial calling for his removal from office was published last month. Many evangelicals continue to support him wholeheartedly because he has proven repeatedly that he can be trusted to keep his campaign promises and to govern faithfully and conservatively. Now, and of course, this is an opinion piece, okay? Now, others vow never to support him because they feel he embodies anti-Christian ethics. Now, And it goes on to kind of, in this vein, dismissing any claims that Trump is anti-Christian, his moral failings, or overlooking his moral failings. But notice what he, here's another paragraph. He says, for many evangelicals, the decision to vote and to continue to support Donald Trump especially boils down to this. He operates from the Republican Party. Now, this is important. He operates from the Republican Party, which represents life, liberty, and conservative Judeo-Christian values. So whoever his Democratic opponent turned out to be in November, that person would stand on the Democratic Party platform, which is immoral, anti-Christian, anti-God, anti-life, anti-freedom. Seems pretty clear and simple. Now, of course, keep in mind that this is an opinion piece, but it is the opinion and sentiments of many of those 85% of evangelicals who support Trump. Now, notice the class of difference. In other words, you have to overlook, and she addresses this. I didn't really get into it, but she does address this. I'm going to go back and read. President Trump certainly has a colorful past, and this is the key reason why I do not support him. I did not support him in the Republican presidential primary of 2016. I just couldn't imagine a man of his moral failings representing this nation and becoming the leader of the free world. However, when it ultimately came down to a choice between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton on November 8th, it was a no-brainer. I would have crawled on my hands and knees to the polls if necessary to vote against her. That's exactly what my vote was at the time, a vote against Hillary Clinton. Now, here's the interesting thing. They're both the same people, okay? But let me get to where I want to really point out. Now, listen to this. Speaking to Cyrus, let me go back. My church, now this is the same writer. I'm kind of jumping around in this article right here because I want to bring out certain points. Now, again, in order to support Donald Trump, the cognitive dissonance that they have to go through, ignoring his moral failings, and notice she had no problems pointing out Hillary. But we're gonna get to again where the line of demarcation was for them, and surprisingly, I'm not even going to argue with that reasoning. But in fact, let me show you right here. Had Hillary won, would she have been as Christian friendly as Donald Trump? I say no, she wouldn't have been. Now, the problem I have, of course, is the compromise, not Donald Trump, not Hillary, but the compromise of what they think they're gaining by supporting him. And I'll come back to that. But remember I asked the question, right? Is Donald Trump a fulfillment of biblical prophecy? They think he is. Like this article I'm getting ready to read. They think that he is a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. They assert that God placed him in office. So therefore, that gives us the mental justification to ignore every wrong thing. Okay? Now, here's another paragraph. My church went through a study in 2019 called Old Testament 19 or OT 19, in which we read much of the Old Testament together. The very same week that the Christianity Today editorial calling for Trump's removal was published, our assigned reading concluded Isaiah chapters 44 and 45. Now, remember last month, in December, Christianity came out with an opinion piece with a scathing rebuke of Trump, calling for his removal. And of course, it divided the Christian world along party lines. Interesting enough, it didn't divide along biblical lines, right? It divided along party lines. And some call Christianity Today, the person who wrote the article, they demonized him and everything else. Now, and then people who supported Trump, of course, supported him along, of course, party lines. And that's a problem here. But that's what she was referring to. So, he says, in these chapters, the Israelites were captives in Babylon, and God used a non-Israelite, a Persian king named Cyrus, to free his people from captivity and rebuild the temple in Jerusalem. Now that is true. If you go back to the history, in Jeremiah, Daniel, and then also you go back and read the books like of Nehemiah and Ezra. So Cyrus was a post-Babylonian captivity king. And not only does Cyrus also has some prophetic, profound prophetic significance. Now, and one of this is that you see this in the book of Daniel, where Daniel, who of course his lifetime was spent during this 70-year exile. The prophet Jeremiah had prophesied that Israel would be in captivity, for 70 years. Now, as the 70 years was drawing to a close, Daniel was reading the prophecy of Jeremiah. And he began to realize, hey, wait a minute, these 70 years, are coming to a close. So he began to pray and to seek God. And God gave him a dream, gave him a prophecy, and also sent an angel to explain what was going to happen. And one of those dreams was a 70-week prophetic timetable, which would be issued by Cyrus the king. Now, we know this because he said that when the decree that would be issued to go forth and rebuild Jerusalem, then that would begin a prophetic time clock that would lead us up to Jesus' first and second coming. Okay? So it was a 70-week or 70 sets of 7-year period, totaling 490 years, but it would lead us right to Jesus. Now, Cyrus was instrumental because he issued, after the 70 years was complete, he issued the decree that Nehemiah and Jeremiah and Zerubbabel, those Jewish leaders, could go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the temple, rebuild the walls, and rebuild the city of Jerusalem. So there was a two things that was going on there that he issued. Now she's focusing, of course, on the fact that Cyrus gave the decree to go back and rebuild Jerusalem. So he says, speaking to Cyrus, God said, "For my sake, Jacob, my servant Israel, my chosen, I summon you by name and bestow upon you a title, honor, though you do not acknowledge me. I am the Lord, and there is no other. Apart from me, there is no God. I will strengthen you, though you have not acknowledged me, so that from this rising of the sun to the place of its setting, men may know that there is none beside me." Now, this is what she goes on and says, "I see some parallels between God's anointing of the Persian king of Cyrus and the election of President Donald Trump. Cyrus clearly was not a follower of God, but God anointed him and gave him the title of honor. Donald Trump has not historically been a follower of God either, yet God has also bestowed upon him the title and honor and given him the role of shepherding the most influential, powerful nation in the history of the world." Now, this is amazing because, again, she's comparing Cyrus to Trump, right? This is an opinion piece. So, okay. Let's see if she makes an accurate comparison. Now, Cyrus was a Persian king. We don't know the depths of his godliness. God gave them favor. there were many kings throughout Israel's history that God gave favor. For example, you go back as far as even from the beginning, where God gave Joseph favor through Pharaoh, and he preserved the nation. God gave Daniel favor with Nebuchadnezzar and his son Belshazzar, and then you see now also Cyrus the king. We see at the time of Esther, you see God giving these great world leaders favor, and they preserved Israel to some point or another. Okay, but that was only their part to it. Now, in order to justify and say that, okay, in her opinion, she's saying that God has, and notice she acknowledged that he hadn't been a follower of God. And then she says, but yet God gives him this title and honor of shepherding the most influential people, powerful nation in the history of the world. Okay, here's the problem with this. You can say that about every president. In other words, in Romans chapter 13, it talks about that there is no power other than God, right? The powers that be are ordained, meaning the government. And specifically, when you talk about the history of our nation, there have been 45 presidents, right? You can literally say that all 45 presidents have been appointed by God. Now, especially when you talk about this, President Trump's predecessor, which they don't want to talk about. But literally every president. So, in other words, in order to make it seem like this is some type of unique situation, like with Israel and like with Cyrus, is an unfair comparison. Why? Because Israel wasn't a nation, or they wasn't in the sense of America right now is not in the need of being preserved. And one of the things that I don't like about Christians, I understand when you think about conservative media, their smear campaign, but they're not honest and they're not truthful. For example, when it comes to Barack Obama. If you say that Barack Obama is the worst president ever, then basically you have to tell me that when he took office in 2009, when he took office in 2009, this country was at the best it possibly could be. And then in just 8 years, he ruined the nation, and now God raised up this man, this unlikely hero, but these dark hidden characteristics to save this nation. And this is what the picture that they give of Barack Obama. In other words, the point is that Cyrus gave the decree, and that's basically all he did. Now, he was king, he had been a dictator, he had absolute power, and that gave them the authority to do that, and God's purpose was accomplished through that. But that was it. Now, if you want to say that Trump now has risen, now we have to examine, well, what is it that he's done? In other words, Donald Trump is not a fulfillment of Bible prophecy. But let's kind of look at what he's done. All right. Let me see. Where am I at here? Let's see. This is, no, that's not what I want to go to. Okay. It says, it turns out that millions of us who held our noses and voted for Trump have been quite pleasantly surprised by his errant support of values and the policies that we hold dear. He has been the most pro-life president in the history of our nation, and he was the first president to ever attend the annual March of Life on Capitol Hill. He has been a true friend to small businesses, and he has appointed hundreds of wonderful federal judges. He is defending religious liberty, and he is improving our international trade relationships, and among many other accomplishments, he's making our military stronger and our nation safer. Despite all of these successes, many persist in demanding the removal of Donald Trump because they dislike how he conducts himself. Well, okay, here's the problem with this. Some of this is true, some of this is not true. Some of his accomplishments, to me, are not necessarily accomplishments, but it's him doing what he should do as a president. But let's take a couple of things when he said that he's been the most pro-life president in the history of the nation. The point is, what does that mean? See, a president candidate, and one of the things that Donald Trump did was he targeted the conservative base because he knew he could win. My thing is that the way I look at Donald Trump, he's a trickster. He knows game. He's a salesman. And he knew, for example, that he did not run in 2012. Why? Because he would have lost. When Obama's term ended and the field was wide open, he was able to make a decisive decision, a strategic decision, and he ran a brilliant campaign, a shrewd campaign. Now, what was amazing to me is that Christians looked at him as if they said, "Who is like unto this man?" No, he was shrewd. He spoke to a particular base and energized that base. Now, if you want to say that God's will was to put Trump in, well, by default, yeah, you can say that. But as I said earlier, you could say that about Barack Obama. Barack Obama, remember, was elected twice and with better numbers than Trump. Trump barely won. We can get in. We don't have to get in all of that debate. Now, here's the thing. Now, Trump has been good to the Christian vote, his bloc. He's been good to them. Here's my question. What is it that they've been getting? Now, they think he's a fulfillment of Cyrus. There was another guy. Let me see. I can't. All right. I want to look at one of these sentiments with what I said about this guy. There was a guy with just a top cop in okay, here it is. There was a guy, this top cop in an Alabama town, okay, and this is what he said. Well, he got in trouble because he said that because of Nancy Pelosi and the tore up Donald Trump's speech in back of him, right in front of the cameras. He said, well, she better watch out because she could find a bomb in her house. Now, this was the top cop. And then I posted this on my Facebook page. And he says that, and this is what he said, "I honestly believe that God has placed Donald Trump in a position to bring about prophecy. God bless Trump and God bless America." Now in the same breath, he's talking about or hinting that Pelosi could find a bomb. Now, this was incredibly irresponsible of this man to do that. Now, just think about it. Incredibly irresponsible. He's a cop, and he's standing on Facebook. And there's crazies out there. But okay, besides that, he's in trouble for that now. But in the same breath, notice what he says now. He says, "I believe that God has placed Donald Trump in a position to bring about prophecy." Now, what prophecy? What is he bringing about? See? So let me go back. And this is important because this is, again, as I said, this is how certain Christians have conditioned themselves to accept, therefore to excuse all of the bad and evil in Donald Trump. Now, some of the things, and this is just a partial list, there are some other things that I said before. Some of these things are debatable, a matter of subjective opinion, like when he says that he has appointed hundreds of wonderful federal judges. That means that is conservative judges. Okay, that can be good and can be bad. Now, notice this. He says he's the first president to ever attend the annual March for Life. So what? Right? So what? What does that mean? Here was another thing, that he moved the embassy to Jerusalem. So what? That means absolutely nothing. It has no biblical or prophetic significance at all. Okay? It says that he's been a friend of small businesses. Okay, maybe. He's defending religious liberty. Okay, and again, what does that mean? Now, I think that's partial true that he's defending religious liberty, because there have been in times past people who have gone to me too far with an anti-Christianity sentiment. So, like, for example, even though it's not non-constitutional, well, put like this, courts are fighting over whether or not a student-led student initiative can have prayer meetings, Bible schools, where you have court cases that say they can't. And so they're fighting about that. Okay, so he's actually now signing legislation to restore that. Okay, that's good. And then it says, but some of the other stuff here, improving international trade relationships and things like that, making our military strong. Again, those are debatable things. Here's my point when I say it to Christians. All of these things that you may find favorable, they say, we think that he's fulfilling Bible prophecy. Here is my point to that. I don't think they have any type of biblical or prophetic significance. My assessment of Donald Trump is that he's a person that if you are faithful to him, he's faithful to you. If you're good to him, he is good to you. If you're loyal to him, he'll be loyal to you. Okay? But I also think that he looked at his base and he said, this is the base that I can win. And just like, for example, when a pundit goes on a Fox News or a Breitbart, they know what to say. You know, there's a different pundits that go on and they just say crazy stuff. Why? Because they think that's what Fox News want. They think that's what Fox News base want to hear. Donald Trump knows what his base wants. But here's my point. So what if he gives that? If I'm a presidential candidate and I say to you, guess what? If you elect me president, I'm going to get rid of abortion. Okay, so now I got the Christian vote. Guess what? The Christians now love me. That's an empty promise, though. Because you know what? As president themselves cannot do really anything about ending abortion. At best, now here's where it gets, they can appoint federal judges. But remember, judges just can't go in and start changing laws. There has to be laws already on the books. So that goes back to Congress and the Senate. They're the ones who make laws and pass laws. And guess what you have right now? A divided Senate. So currently right now, and these things always go in cycles. But right now, the Democrats control the House, and the Republicans control the Senate. But the Democrats, remember, they make the laws. That's why, for example, they was able to impeach Trump, because they had more votes. Why was Donald Trump able to be acquitted? Because they had more votes. Had nothing to do with evidence, truth, or whatever. Is that who had the greater votes? So I can make an empty promise to you and say, I'm going to fight to end abortion. Right? Now I get points because you know what? I can always blame the Senate. I tried, y'all. But it's that evil Senate. It's that evil liberals. It's those evil liberals, those Democrats, those murdercrats. Right? The point is, just like when he made the promise of the wall. He knew that wasn't going to happen. When he solemnly promised he's going to build that wall and he's going to make Mexico pay for it. Okay, he's going to make Mexico pay for the wall and America will not spend a dime. You don't hear too much about that now. So the point is that, is Donald Trump a fulfillment of Bible prophecy? No. Let me just also say this, because I've been around as a Christian for 40 years. And I can tell you, almost every president has had their kind of biblical prophecy spotlight. Ronald Reagan, the people thought he was the Antichrist because of his name. Ronald Wilson Reagan, right? 666. Okay, so everybody kind of has that. Well, Trump is one of the ones that I would, there's this new kind of energized that people have with Trump. This kind of, I call it a false hope. That, in other words, what do you think he's going to usher in? He's not. And let me tell you why, Christians. Because the only way real change can happen is that the gospel has to be preached. Lives changed by the gospel. And how can the blind lead the blind? And I'll leave it at that. All right, guys. That's it for this session. I'll see you in the next session.